right, thank you very much. One of the most important topics for anyone in the Solana ecosystem is where am I swapping? Am I getting good prices? And the long term is when will Solana, not if, but when will Solana compete with NASDAQ? When will it compete with centralized exchanges like Binance? When will it have a better experience for users and better price discovery? That is the topic of today, the swap landscape. My name is Michael Marcantonio. I'm the head of DeFi at Galaxy Digital. Galaxy Digital is a diversified financial crypto native institution. We focus primarily on trading, but not just trading. We also focus on asset management, ventures, Bitcoin mining, AI. We do it all. And want to introduce Chris. Chris is CEO of Titan. So let's get started. Chris, tell the audience about yourself and tell them, the DEX aggregator landscape has been dominated by Jupiter. You're taking them on. So give us a little background, what you do, how you got into this, and why should I swap on Titan over Jupiter?
Yeah, sure thing. So I guess what Titan is we have our own algorithm, we have our own DEX aggregator. It has performed extremely well. It does outperform competition around 80% of the time. But not only that, Titan is a meta aggregator. It's Solana's first meta aggregator. So not only do we aggregate our own routes, we also aggregate Jupiter, DFlow, Hashflow, and many others that are coming on, and we route users to the best price no matter what. So really, if you are looking to save 10 basis points on every trade, that compounds. If you do 100 trades, that means you've added like 10% to your portfolio value right there. So we're really looking to provide traders with that, that premium experience where you're really saving as much capital as you can when you're doing trades.
So I don't have to necessarily choose Titan over Jupiter, because if I swap on Titan, I am by definition potentially routing through Jupiter. Is that right?
Exactly. So if Jupiter provides the best route, or DFlow, let's say, we just process the trade through their own contracts. So all we do is that we add better estimations for what your slippage is, and that's why we've seen, on our platform, for Jupiter, for Titan, for DFlow, you've got the slippage down to around 4 basis points, which is like very minimal, especially in crypto markets.
So let's sort of paint the ecosystem and a little topology here, and maybe I can analogize it to TradFi for a second. So in TradFi, you have users, and they want to trade. So they go to their prime brokerage, right? They got the brokerage, and the brokerage interacts with market makers directly, dark pools, and exchanges, right? On Solana, you've got users as well. And the first point of contact is what? They are going to, typically, historically, they've gone to Jupiter, let's say, because Jupiter is aggregating all of the AMMs, the DEXs. And the DEXs really are not, they've historically been seen as exchanges, but that's not really accurate. They're actually automated market makers. So there's these market makers there. Explain where the meta aggregator comes in.
Yeah, so the meta aggregator, you can think more of it like the brokerage level. So they're going out and trying to find out which aggregator can actually give you the best price. Is it DFlow? Is it Jupiter? Is it Titan? So you can think of the aggregator level as like the exchange, right? As NYSE, as NASDAQ. And whoever can get the better price, they'll go fill through that exchange. And when you're thinking about DEXs, I don't actually like the name. Again, these are automated market makers. These are we have these prop AMMs coming up with private liquidity. So, those guys are actually setting the quote, and the discovery is happening on the DEX aggregator side of things. So you can think of brokerage to exchange level to market maker level in terms of DeFi here.
So you want to be the central point of contact between the users and the rest of the market, right? So how much is this ecosystem developing? How much is it in flux? What is going on here? What are the big developments? What are you seeing right now?
Yeah, so I think since we launched last month in our private beta phase, a lot's been happening in the swap ecosystem. I think Camino launched with their Meta Swap product. Jupiter recently launched with their Juno product. So meta aggregation is happening across the board right now. In addition, you're seeing DEXs compete extensively. Everybody knows that these prop AMMs are taking massive amounts of liquidity. Everybody's trying to try and replicate that type of model. Also, you're seeing specializations across the board because regular AMMs, there's going to be a limited use case. You either have specialized or you really target the tail end of the asset.
Right. That makes sense. So, all right. So let's go in a little bit deeper. So I might want to use Titan because I get Jupiter liquidity. What other liquidity do you guys have access to?
Yeah, so we just incorporate a couple RFQ products into the meta aggregator section. We incorporate defaults algorithm, but from our own perspective, we incorporate all these prop AMMs. We incorporate all the dexes that do exist, Radium, Orca, Lifinity. So we're really going through the entire on-chain assets to really power our Talos algorithm.
Right, right. That's interesting. So help me understand how you guys do that, right? So the aggregator business is very much based on routing algorithms, right?
Yep.
And I guess whoever has the best routing algorithm will be the best DEX aggregator, right? And if you're a meta aggregator, are you also routing transactions, trying to find the best route, or are you just leveraging the underlying aggregators?
Yeah. So I guess if you're solely a meta aggregator like Camino, you're just finding out which aggregator has the best routes. But since Titan also has its own aggregator product, we are actively trying to find the best routes for you. So like what we've seen in the ecosystem before and what encouraged us to come in is that we do believe that the current way that a lot of people on Solana do construct their algorithms, do construct their routes, isn't the best way it's suited for crypto markets today. Like how people do it today is that like a lot of these routes are routed in like 5-10% chunks, right? So you're trading like $1,000 notional, you're actually moving this liquidity in $50, $100 chunks on that side, instead of getting to the really detailed portions of like machine level precision on how you're actually allocating everything. In addition, like a lot of pools are excluded just as a function of how classical pathfinding algorithms work, which is what most people use. Like we believe that there are other mathematical methods that can include all of these pools and more and bring it to machine level precision. And that's really where the outperformance does come into play.
So when I'm evaluating a routing algorithm, I'm looking at a couple of things. First, I'm looking at whether or not it's fast, right? And you can think of, I guess, a routing algorithm's challenge is they have to find the best route through n number of different pools, right? And on Solana, that is scaling massively every day, right? So you've got to be really good at that. You also have to but you also want to incorporate as many pools as possible, right? You don't want to leave liquidity on the sidelines. So, and then of course, the trade-off you'll make is that you have to route potentially through these big chunks, right? Because that is a trade-off for speed and efficiency, right? So walk me through how you've attacked each one of those variables in making a better routing algorithm.
Yeah, so the first one is just liquidity. So you need access to all the dexes that provide the vast majority across Solana. Like I think on Titan right now, on its Talos algorithm, we are around 15 to 16 dexes individually. That makes up the vast majority of liquidity that's provided on Solana. But you have to look individually at each one of these pools. There's pools being created every single day, pools that are deemed irrelevant almost immediately. So what we have to really do is figure out which ones have the TVL, which ones have the volume, which ones are users actually interested in, where that can actually be routed through, right? You don't want to route through a pool and it slips 50% immediately. So I guess that's the first one that we really want to try and solve there. So after you have that, then it just comes down to, really figuring out what you can do in terms of slippage estimation here. Because if you're just modifying your real-time slippage, right, in order to land the transaction, we think that a better path is just to minimize, your actual slippage there. So as I said before, Titan currently does slippage at around 4 basis points. We've done that by updating the quote extremely fast. So basically what you see is what you get. And and the algorithm also automatically adjusts to find pools that have more liquidity, more volume flowing through. So you would slip less if somebody does trade in advance.
Interesting. Got it. And so how do you get around, you said that you don't route through these chunks, right?
Yep.
Is that similar?
Yeah, so the reason why we don't route through chunks is it's a function of a different algorithm approach. So classical pathfinding approaches like Bellman-Ford, which is what most people use, they have to go through these chunks. You could think of this as more of like spray and pray type of mechanism, where you're sending people down a maze. If they hit a dead end, they come back and you just keep sending them through. So you cut it off at a certain point. But the approach that we take, it's like your pure optimization. You're finding a precise point that you could get, you could cut the chunks up into machine level precision there.
Got it. Interesting. And so Bellman-Ford has been the traditional algorithm that has been used. what does that mean? Help me understand that. Like, and why is that not as good of an algorithm?
Yeah. So the first thing is that Bellman Ford is something that is used very prevalently across a lot of different industries. But the issue in financial markets, crypto markets in general, is that you have to route in fixed amounts for Bellman Ford. All right. So this does pose a problem because you don't want to route in fixed amounts. You want to be able to dynamically adjust how much you route based on how much slippage, how much the price actually changes on the pool as you're routing more through it. So that is the first thing. The other thing is that Bellman Ford scales exponentially badly, right? You increase the number of pools or you bring down the level of your chunks, it's going to cost you per compute extremely heavily. You have to horizontally scale all your servers to do it. The way that we do it with optimization is that it identifies the point and that limits the amount of computational resources that are required.
So how fast is your algorithm? Do you have benches on that?
Yeah, so our algorithm right now, it could find, you know, provably optimal in around 50 milliseconds on that site, but it takes longer to go full proven. What we're doing is like it finds a path, 50 milliseconds, that path can be provably optimal, maybe a couple minutes later after you exhaust every single opportunity.
Got it. Wow, that's crazy. And do you have any benches or hypothesis or of your competitor's speed?
Well, my hypothesis right now, like, it all depends on what infrastructure you're running it on. But it seems like it's around 30 milliseconds for, I guess, any other competitor out there. So there is a speed benefit on there, and we are taking it. We are constantly, optimizing our things. We've only been live for a month at this point, so it's just a continuing work in process.
It's hard to reason though about what users want if they are willing to make a trade-off on speed. I'm not saying that yours is making a trade-off, but like, would you make a trade-off of 20 milliseconds on speed to get better access to better prices? I don't know. What goes into your thinking on that? How do you reason about incorporate? Because every new pool you bring in, every new DEX you bring in, right? You now have a larger graph across which to traverse. And that larger graph is going to necessarily, I would think, create more latency. Is that not, have you figured out a way around that such that you can scale the graph but also preserve optimal routing and latency?
Yeah, I think that is just a problem on like how the underlying algorithm works, right? Because from our estimations, adding extra pools doesn't really increase, the latency on that side. So it scales very, very nicely. But with traditional pathfinding algorithms, that, Bellman Ford, that is an issue. You can't add more pools beyond a certain point because the complexity increases. The algorithm can actually run to completion there.
Really? So, okay. Let's shift gears a little. So algo is very interesting. I love the algo. And I think different innovations in algorithms, especially routing algorithms, fascinating. They come from, right, like traditional routing algorithms, right? You want to route, let's say you use Google Maps, right? It's a Bellman Ford type algorithm, right? Dijkstra, it's maybe a Dijkstra algorithm actually. There's different trade-offs there that you can make. Traditional arbitrage has been detected through using Bellman Ford, detecting negative cycles in a Bellman Ford type algorithm. Where did you learn about this? Did you learn about this in school, in your professional career? And what did you discover along that way that said, you know what, fuck it, I'm gonna get into this game, even though you're taking on a huge player, probably the most established player in all of Solana. You must have had some real secret sauce there.
Yeah, so I think my previous experience was really looking at EVM solvers, right? Because the honest truth is that algorithm complexity in the Ethereum space is a lot higher than on Solana. There's so many more aggregators, so many more solvers in that ecosystem. But the key thing here is that they have 12 seconds to really find something, 1.5 seconds if you're on CowSwap, right? They have a lot more time. What Jupiter has really done that's very, very impressive is that they have managed to make a very good algorithm be able to spit out results within that 400 millisecond block time. Now, what we thought is that we could marry, the benefits of a more advanced algorithm and just bring down that amount of time that's required to compute from like what's used in Ethereum to what can be usable in Solana at this stage. And that's, that really convinced us to go in because with our win rate, with how much outperformance people are actually getting, we thought we had a chance to really appeal to a certain type of trader that's really looking to save, 10 basis points on every trade because they know it matters in the long run.
Right. So with what do you see as the big developments in this space over the next year? What has happened this year so far, and where do you see it going?
Yeah, so I think, this year, two fronts. First is like on the meta aggregation side. Us, Camino, Jupiter, everybody has a meta aggregation product right now. So I think people are trying to appeal to the front end user in various ways. Like, are you looking for the premium trading experience? Are you looking to really just land as effectively as possible, as fast as possible? So people are targeting different niches on there. I think the other side of what developments are currently happening are these prop AMMs, right? SolFi, ZeroFi, Obrick. This is probably where the market is going to. If you have professional market makers, as you have on NASDAQ, as you have on NYSE, that are making markets, it's just inevitable that these guys are going to be finding better prices. Because, these guys came up nowhere in November and started doing 30% of Solana's with DEX volume on there. So we're going to see more of a convergence towards this model, in my opinion, where more and more professional market makers come on board and start making markets for, on-chain liquidity.
So I don't know if everyone knows about SolFi and ZeroFi and Obrick. So let's talk about that for a second and how that's changing the landscape. Who are they competing with? Who are they benefiting? And what is going on there, right? Because from on-chain, you just see the word SolFi and you think, okay, that's probably an AMM,
Yeah.
right? Are they AMMs?
I guess they're a type of AMM because you can try and hit their contracts, you can try and execute through them, right? But what's critical here is that the prices that they're giving are dramatically better than everybody else in the ecosystem. The issue with the current previous state was that liquidity was passive, right? You had prices being determined by mathematical function, XY equals K, concentrated liquidity, you need V3 pools, right? That's being phased out because you need active market making. You're passive, you're going to get picked off pretty quickly. Your LPs are going to take a permanent loss. If you have active market making, they will adjust on the fly. And from what we can see on chain, they're providing better prices the vast majority of the time. So that's probably where we're going to be heading. And it's the best price is going to matter because, in the end, nobody knows who's doing your market making when you buy a stock of Apple. You're just looking at who's giving your best price.
Interesting. So do you think in the future, you're going to see a lot more of these players, and are they going to push out the Radiums and the Orcas of the world, or do you still see a place? Because as these guys are creeping up, you're also seeing a revisiting of the traditional DEX model with Pump Fund, right? Launching their own DEX. So how do you see the landscape looking like?
So I think there's two different types of markets when you're making a market on this. The first one is your tail end assets, right? So these are your pump fund tokens. A traditional market maker or any market maker that's processing high volume is not going to be taking a look at these assets. It's too risky for them. That's why the Uni V2 type of pool like Radium or Pump Swap, it's very efficient for handling liquidity for these tail end assets. But we're talking highly concentrated liquidity. It's Sol USDC, USDT. That's where professional market makers come in because they can close the spread. They can hold the best prices possible because it's a highly liquid market. And market makers run their own market making strategies, and if they think that they can make profit, it's good for everybody. Because in traditional equities, these guys are making less than a basis point when they're doing market making. We expect that to happen here as well. And the spreads right now seem pretty big. That's why we're expecting more and more market makers. They're looking at what's happening in the ecosystem. It's just very juicy. So we expect more and more people to come in.
So what sort of spreads are we talking about here?
I've heard pretty high basis point spreads on that side.
Pretty high is like 5, or is pretty high like 50?
Very high. These are spreads, that if you're a traditional firm, you're probably killing another person to try and get it at that point.
And what is the difference between what a SolFi does and what a traditional RFQ system does, right?
So traditional RFQ, what's the issue with traditional RFQ is that you got to hold the quote for, let's say, a minute, 10 seconds, however long they want to do it. With the difference here is that these prop AMMs, they're adjusting dynamically on the fly. So you're getting a quote, you can ping them like you ping them like a normal AMM, but they're not going to hold the quote for you. You either execute right there on that same block, or the price just changes for you. On an RFQ system, you're sourcing liquidity, but that liquidity, that market maker has to take the risk of you maybe executing 4 seconds later.
So for the audience, how this sort of works is you got Binance, centralized exchange. And price discovery is traditionally found there. Why? They got the most liquidity, they have the most market making, they've got a ton of volume. And then there's other centralized exchanges that might feed off of that. Sometimes they'll be leading, but typically they'll be trailing Binance. And then you've got Solana and DEXs, right? And so is the reason why Solana or Ethereum, for example, their prices trail Binance, why is that? And can you see, what do we need to do for Solana and for on-chain protocols to actually be leading price discovery one day?
Yeah, I think it's just a little difference of your timing. Solana block times are still 400 milliseconds. You're trading, if you're trading traditional markets, I don't really know what Binance's time frequencies are, but if you're not trading nanoseconds, then I think you're kind of done on traditional markets, right? So if you're trading nanosecond difference versus 400 milliseconds, that's a world of difference right there. What you really want to do in order to bring DeFi more in line with CeFi, if assets are being held on both chains, you just have to lower your block times, and then they'll start converging on there. If market makers can provide better pricing at smaller latencies, it reduces the risk for them and it provides better prices for the end user.
It's interesting because on Ethereum, right, there's this entire cottage industry of trying to figure out how to reduce MEV, right, and how to provide the best user experience, but all on the backdrop of 12-second block times. I mean, a lot of the work that they do is trying to mitigate the impact of having prices that are stale for 12 seconds. Yeah. And so what you're saying, I think, is if we can reduce block times on Solana, that should be a huge goal of ours, right? Reducing block times by as much as possible. And as block times are reduced, prices will be more in line with the centralized exchange prices, right?
Exactly. You're just optimizing the liquidity layer for us. You lower block times, people can hold better prices, bring prices more in line. And then, the other thing is really relaxing the technical requirements. If, let's say, a route can use more pools involved, that'll efficiently, use all the liquidity on Solana for traders that want to execute.
Yeah, because on Solana, you're kind of limited to the amount of pools you can route through per transaction, right?
Yep.
This is one of the things on Ethereum that may or may not be a benefit. I'm not sure. I would assume it is, which is you can route through as many pools as you want in one single transaction. On Solana, you're really limited to 4, right? 4 hops. Is that generally right?
Yeah, basically. The main issue here is that the account lock limit is 64, right? Some dexes lock a lot more, some dexes lock less, but you're generally held to 4. Sometimes you may be able to squeeze in 5. So that's the thing there. That's the technical limitation. If that was raised tomorrow, right? Our algorithm, I believe Jupiter's algorithm, can also start going to more pools, 5, 6, 7 pools, and you start getting a lot more efficient prices on DeFi as well, even without block times going down.
But isn't the 4 hops actually a benefit for your speed, right? If you're starting to construct trades that are 10 hops deep, that's going to take a lot longer, yeah, right?
So you just got to balance. So it's what kind of opportunities can you find? Is that extra spread worth you taking that latency or that hit? Because we have also noticed sometimes just a 1-pool swap is probably your best swap, right, in comparison to a very detailed 4-pool swap going through a random meme coin.
Right. Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, meme coins are interesting. I'm glad you brought that up because meme coins, typically, have they benefited from DEX aggregation as much? Typically you'd probably see only a few pools at most for meme coins, right? And there's not as many ways to route through that, right?
Yeah. I actually think that meme coins are probably a big driver of Solana DeFi in terms of, actually pushing volume, because the main benefits of doing aggregation for meme coins is finding your optimal SOL USDC, USDT pair. Your price improvements, rather than trading directly from a SOL to a meme coin pool, is trying to get that price improvement on these major pairs. If you can get that price improvement, which what we were seeing, you can increase the amount of meme coins that you get a better price.
Right. No. So if you could route through more pools and do it as fast as you're currently doing on Solana, do you think that would increase price discovery and deliver better prices in of itself? Or do we also need to pair that with shorter block times? Obviously, both would be better.
Yeah.
But what is the biggest bottleneck?
I think the biggest bottleneck is just the ability to include more dexes in a pool. For me, more pools. It's just unlocks a lot more liquidity, unlocks a lot more interesting use cases. And I think, you relax 64 to 128, for example. There might be some new product that people come up with that we haven't seen before. If I just lower block times, I'm pretty sure we can all see where the future is. Better price discovery, faster trades, but is there going to be an innovative new use case, an innovative new trade type? I'm not sure without raising that lock limit.
So if we cut block times in half, that's going to be a big lift for you guys, I would think, because you got to be twice as fast, right?
Yep.
Or is that something that you're considering, you're looking towards, you're optimizing around, or?
Yeah, so I think for us, that means that we have to keep the performance while keep just lowering the speed of the latency of the algorithm, right? Because if the algorithm takes too long to compute, it doesn't leave time for leftover logic or transaction sending procedures to actually start to land the transaction. So that's always in the back of our mind. That's why, like, Fire Answer is going to be a big upgrade, and I think every single routing algorithm will have to start accommodating for that.
Yeah, I mean, if we could get to 1 million transactions, a second, I mean, and that's what Fired Answer is aiming towards. I think, Max and Anza are also pushing towards that, right? Which seems like a necessary thing, but it also seems like a giant step forward, not just in crypto, but like in everything, right? Like I think Max's slide earlier said NASDAQ had 70,000 transactions a second, something like that. We'd be blowing them out of the water, but that's also going to put a lot more pressure on you guys and on market makers. So you think you guys are up to the challenge? You think you can keep up with the innovation there?
Yeah, well, that's why we're all here.
Yeah.
Crypto moves at such a fast pace. That's why it's fun, and I guess that's why I'm not in TradFi anymore. If you're using Bloomberg, you're using the same thing you used 20 years ago, right? So,
right.
You just gotta keep innovating, or you just die in this industry.
So what does the next 12 months look like for Titan? What are your big goals? What are you trying to do?
Yeah, our big goal is just really just concentrate on pushing our product as much as possible. So we just launched last month. We're still in a private beta phase, right? So we really want to scale up our infrastructure so that we can handle more users, handle the general public. So anybody going on to Titan's website who really use our product. Also scale our API for our users who want to trade systematically, and then have more innovative order types that can flood through the system that people can really take advantage of.
So even in private beta right now, give us a sense. How many transactions are you seeing a day?
So in terms of volume, like, we're pushing around 10 million a day at this point.
Wow.
And like, we only let in a couple thousand users on that side. So the response has been really good, especially from the power traders, right? Because these guys are the ones that really care about pushing like $100,000 and then trying to get the outperformance of, like, let's say 15 basis points. That's big savings for them right there.
I mean, the cool thing about what you're saying is that you start with this smaller private group, you get feedback from them immediately, and you can iterate. What feedback have you gotten? What do they say to you?
Yeah. So I think for us, they very enjoy the speed that we're processing everything. They're seeing the speed of the updates. They're seeing how, like, they see that they are getting performance improvements over what other options do exist on the marketplace. But on the feedback side, they're telling us, like, hey guys, I want to trade a meme coin. I want to be more efficient, and that's what we've really been looking at lately, right? They want to have the full access to what makes DeFi great. You can trade any asset that you want, and that's what we've been really focusing on optimizing.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what's cool about meme coins for you guys and for all of us is that they're pretty much native to Solana, right? You're not going to Binance, you're going to Solana. And I think the DEX aggregators are also native to, not just Solana because they're on other chains, but they're really native to crypto and Web3. So what you're doing here is fascinating. Do you think that there is going to be any big changes coming up? Do you think anything that anyone in this audience should know about? Or do you think it's just business as usual, trying to eke out more performance improvements over time?
I think the main thing is that you're going to see a convergence of a lot of different models into one unified, like, transaction layer, right? You have RFQ systems, you have like standard, like, passive LP pools, you have order book mechanisms, you have these private market makers in play. I think what you'll start seeing is that all of these things, although they may be separate right now, will be fully composable with each other very, very soon, and that's just gonna give price improvement across the board for everybody.
It's very cool because while historically DEXs have been less efficient than CLOBs, they have been more efficient at illiquid assets, right? And this has gone really underreported and underdiscussed in traditional finance, because right now in traditional finance, you have a ton of illiquid assets that are traded OTC because there's no real price discovery there. So, but if we can catch up to TradFi on the market making side and the speed side and the price discovery side, like what you're seeing with SolFi and all these other private market makers, plus maintain the AMM structure, and route through you guys, I think it's going to have the best of both worlds.
Yeah, that's why like I thought the meme coin craze, right? It was so beneficial for the entire ecosystem. The entire network was upgrading itself to handle the amount of volume, handle the amount of traffic. And this functions as a graduation process because, usually you list, if you're a small company, you list as a pig slip and you try and work your way up. Or you just go with a big IPO and that's really gated. Here, it democratizes everything. If you have a good asset and you list to on a pump fund token, you have the opportunity to eventually be listed on like one of these like heavy duty market makers that really want to push volume through.
Right. All right, so in the last couple seconds, if I'm someone in this audience and I want to use Titan, where do you go? What do you do? Who do you talk to?
Yeah, so like you would probably go to either our Twitter page at Titan_exchange, or you go to our website at app.titandex.io. There, like I guess you can sign up for the waitlist and then you'll be onboarded when it comes time. Or you go to our Discord for an access code in order to really try out the product and to see how you like it and give us any feedback that you want. We just want the most honest, brutal feedback possible to help us improve our product here.
Well, I will say Galaxy will certainly be checking it out and testing it, and I will be giving you real-time feedback, but I'm really excited. It's awesome. I think we're at time, Chris. It was great talking with you, and hope everyone enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you.